How's it going, folks? Can you guys hear me okay? All right, let's get started. It is 3:01. Welcome back. I haven't seen the folks in the lab for a couple of weeks. And guys, we should have an easy lab today. We're only covering one lab, which is lab 2. And we don't have a lot of activities. Today we have two in-lab activities. Both of them are going to be done using the Edpuzzle website. So it's going to be watching a video for the dissection of the fetal pig and also a video that's going to walk you through a human model of the body cavities. Okay? So let me share my screen with you so we can go over what we are talking about today. And the stuff that we will be covering today, we are slightly behind the lecture. So this is all things that you guys have seen before. So today we're going to be talking about body cavities, membranes, and associated organs. Okay? Now, what are we going to be covering? Oops. What are we going to be covering? We're going to be talking about the different body cavities. We're going to explain what a body cavity is. We're going to talk about the membranes that cover the different body cavities. And then we're going to talk about the subdivision of the abdominal pelvic cavity, okay, which can be subdivided into the abdominal pelvic quadrants and the 9 abdominal pelvic regions. And then we're going to have our lab activities. After the lab activity, we have our quiz, in-lab quiz. And the quiz is always the last thing that we do for the day. So after I'm done with my lecture, you're done with the activities, you're going to jump on Lamaku and take the in-lab quiz. After you're done with the quiz, you can just log off the call. Okay? All right, so let's get started. Let's define what a body cavity is. Guys, when we talk about a body cavity, we understand that our body, inside of our body, is not made of one solid piece of muscle and bone. Right? When we cut through an animal or dissect a human being, there are spaces inside of our body. And those spaces, they are filled with different organs and structures. Okay? Oftentimes, those cavities that we have in our body, they are covered by a membrane. In the example of a cavity, which we're going to talk more about it in a minute, the cavity that is surrounding our heart, there's a membrane called the pericardial membrane, and this membrane is a double-layered membrane. What do I mean by a double layer? Everybody look up here just for a sec. Imagine this sheet of paper here, okay, is a membrane. If I take this sheet of paper and I fold it in half, just like what I did right now. And then I take this folded membrane and I wrap it around an organ, just like what I'm doing right now here. I created a membrane around the organ, and within that membrane, if you look over here, there's a space, right? Where my finger is. In between the folded membrane, there's a space right there. This space is a cavity. And that cavity is going to be filled with fluid, and the fluid helps to protect the surface of the organs. Okay? Now, we have two main cavities in our body. We have a big cavity in the front, and we have a cavity in the back. And those major cavities, as we're going to see right now, they are divided into smaller cavities. So it's one cavity inside another cavity. In the back, we have a cavity that is called the dorsal body cavity. And the dorsal body cavity is divided into two smaller cavities. We have the cranial cavity. What are we going to find within the cranial cavity? Within the cranial cavity, we're going to find our brain. And then, as an extension of the cranial cavity, we're going to find what we call the spinal cavity. What are we going to find inside the spinal cavity? We are going to find the spinal cord. Now, both of these cavities here, within them, we're going to find a fluid called the CSF, or the cerebral spinal fluid. And this fluid helps to protect our brain, it helps to protect our spinal cord. Okay? Now, in the front of the body, we have another cavity called the ventral body cavity. And this ventral body cavity is subdivided into smaller cavities. The one that is superior to the diaphragm, which is a muscle right here, that is very important for respiration. The one that is superior to the diaphragm is what we call the thoracic cavity. And we're going to see how within the thoracic cavity, we're going to find the smaller cavities. We're going to find the pericardial cavity. We're going to find the pleural cavity. We're going to talk more about them in a minute. Now, below the diaphragm, we have another cavity called the abdominal cavity. And then below that, we have the pelvic cavity. Oftentimes, guys, we're going to talk about the abdominal and the pelvic cavity as being one because there is no actual separation between the abdominal and the pelvic, like we have the separation between the thoracic and the abdominal, okay? There is no muscle or membrane separating the two. So oftentimes they are described as the abdominal pelvic cavity or simply as the peritoneal cavity. And we're going to talk more about the peritoneal cavity also in a minute. Okay? These cavities are all filled with fluid. Inside of our body is a wet space, okay, filled with fluid. And I'm not talking about blood, all right? I am talking about fluid that is going to occupy those cavities. Now, several of the cavities in our body, as I mentioned earlier, they're made of a serous membrane, which is double layered. One layer, the layer that is actually touching the viscera, touching the organ, is what we call the visceral layer. So we would have the visceral layer right here, which is right against the heart. Okay, now the layer that is on the walls of the cavity right here, on the outside, this is what we call the parietal layer. So the visceral layer is touching the viscera, touching the organ. The parietal layer is covering the walls of the cavity. Now, inside of that space, again, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to find a cavity. So this space right here is the cavity, and this cavity is filled with a fluid, protecting the surface of the organ. Now let's focus on the thoracic cavity only. And within the thoracic cavity, there will be a cavity around the heart. There will be cavities surrounding our lungs. The cavity that is surrounding the heart is made by a membrane called the pericardial membrane. And because it is double layered, we're going to find the parietal and the visceral pericardial membrane. So the visceral is the one touching the heart. The parietal is the one on the outside. What are we going to find inside the pericardial cavity? We're going to find a fluid called the pericardial fluid. So guys, the membrane is called pericardial. The cavity is called pericardial. The fluid is called pericardial. Okay, scientists are not very, very imaginative. Okay, now what about the lungs? We're going to find another membrane that is going to cover the lungs. And this membrane has a different name. This is what we call the pleural membrane. And just like the pericardial cavity, we're also going to find the two layers of the pleural membrane. We have the visceral pleural and we have the parietal pleural. This membrane, the pleural membrane, is going to create cavities surrounding our lungs. And the cavity themselves are called the pleural cavity. Take a wild guess what the fluid inside those cavities are going to be. They're going to be the pleural fluids. Okay? Now, I don't know if you remember from the first day of class, but I mentioned to you guys that I used to do cancer research at the Cancer Center. I did it for almost 5 years. And that also I was doing research on the type of cancer called mesothelioma. Now, what is mesothelioma? Mesothelioma is the cancer of the pleural membrane right here. This membrane that surrounds our lungs. How is mesothelioma caused? Mesothelioma is caused by inhalation of a fiber called asbestos fiber, and that fiber eventually gets trapped in the pleural membrane, causing chronic inflammation and causing the transformation of the pleural cells into malignant cells, into mesothelioma cells. All right, so we talked about the thoracic cavity. Now let's move down the diaphragm, inferior to the diaphragm, and let's talk about this big cavity that we have down here called the abdominal pelvic cavity. And I told you that the abdominal pelvic cavity also has a different name. This is also what we call the peritoneal cavity. So if you hear me saying peritoneal cavity or abdominal pelvic cavity, they mean the same thing. Okay? And this peritoneal cavity, take a wild guess, is made by a membrane called peritoneal membrane. And inside the cavity, we're going to have a fluid called peritoneal fluid. Now, again, this is a double-layered membrane. Therefore, we have a visceral peritoneum, and the visceral peritoneum is surrounding every single organ inside the peritoneal cavity, like the liver, the stomach, the large intestine, the small intestine. And the parietal peritoneal membrane is the one that is actually on the walls of the cavity right here, okay, covering the wall of the cavity. Now, we all know that our small intestine and the large intestines, they are held in place inside the peritoneal cavity. So that when we stand up, guys, our small intestine and the large intestine, they're not going to drop down right here to the pelvic cavity. No, they are going to stay in place. Now, what is going to hold the small intestine and the large intestine in place? Well, the small intestine is going to be held by a section of the peritoneal membrane called the mesentery. So the mesentery holds the small intestine in place, while the large intestine is held by a different layer of the peritoneal membrane called the mesocolon. Okay, so mesentery holds the small intestine, mesocolon holds the large intestine. Now, both of them, they belong to the peritoneal membrane. Okay. All right, moving on now, let's talk about the cranial cavity as well as the spinal cavity. And both of those cavities, we're going to find not one, not two, but three different membranes, guys. Our brain and our spinal cord are so important that we need an extra layer of protection. And that's what we have. There are three membranes covering the brain and covering the spinal cord. They are what we call the meninges. So we have the cranial meninges and we have the spinal meninges. Okay? What are these three membranes? The outermost membrane is what we call the dura mater. Is the most superficial layer, okay? And is the toughest one. Guys, dura means tough. Mater means mother in Latin. So the dura mater literally means the tough mother. Is a very tough layer to cut through. Okay? Underneath the dura mater, we're going to find another layer, which is right in the middle, called the arachnoid matter. Why is it called arachnoid? It's called arachnoid because the membrane, they kind of look like a spider web, hence the name arachnoid. And then finally, the innermost layer, which is a very, very thin, actually touching the organ, either touching the brain or touching the spinal cord. This is what we call the pia matter. Pia means soft. So this is the soft mother. Okay, so we have the tough mother, the spider mother, and the soft mother. Now, you understand now that what if someone has an inflammation of one of these meninges? It could be the cranial or a spinal. This is a condition called meningitis. So what is meningitis? Meningitis is the inflammation of one of the meninges. And it could be the cranial meninges or it could be the spinal meninges. And this inflammation could be caused by a bacterial infection. This is what we call bacterial meningitis. Or it could be caused by a viral infection, and we would call it viral meningitis. Any questions, guys? All right. Moving on. Let's talk now a little bit about the subdivision of the abdominal pelvic cavity. And we have seen this before in the lecture, but because the abdominal pelvic cavity is so extensive, scientists, they have decided to divide them into smaller regions. Why? To help with the diagnosis of diseases. Okay, so one of those subdivisions, what we call the abdominal pelvic quadrants, and there are 4 of them. How are those abdominal pelvic quadrants created? They are created by 2 perpendicular lines. One vertical line called the median line passing right through the belly button, right through the middle of the body, and a horizontal line called the transumbilical line passing also right through the belly button. So there you have it. You have created 4 different quadrants. The quadrants to the right of the median line, we call them right quadrants. The ones to the left are called the left quadrants. The quadrants above the transumbilical line is called the upper. The ones below it is going to be called the lower. So we have a right upper quadrant. We have a right lower quadrant. We have a left upper quadrant. We have the left lower quadrant. Let's take a closer look at some of the organs that are found within those quadrants, guys. We can see right here that most of the stomach is found within the left upper quadrant. The spleen would be entirely right here on the left upper quadrant. The liver, most of the liver is in the right upper quadrant. The gallbladder is entirely right here in the right upper quadrant. And then we have the appendix right here, which is totally located within the right lower quadrant. So when a patient walks into a clinic or a hospital and the patient is complaining of pains in different regions of the body, of the abdominal pelvic quadrant, a doctor or nurse can start doing a diagnosis. Possibly thinking about what is the organ associated with the pain that the patient is feeling. Okay? The other subdivision of the abdominal pelvic cavity is what we call the 9 abdominal pelvic regions. And we're going to start right here, right in the middle of the abdominal pelvic cavity, a region that includes the belly button. This is what we call the umbilical region. Now, on top of the umbilical region, we're going to find what we call the epigastric. What does epi means? Epi means above, on top. So this is the region that is found on top of our intestines right here. Okay. Now, if we have an epigastric, we're also going to find a hypogastric. So hypogastric is underneath the umbilical region. Hypo means under, below. To the side of the epigastric, we have regions right underneath our ribs. So we can see the ribs are covering that region. And these are what we call the hypochondriac. Guys, chondriac is in relation to the ribs. So hypochondriac is underneath the ribs. So we have right hypochondriac, left hypochondriac. To the side of the umbilical region, we're going to find a region called the lumbar, and lumbar means lower back. So we have the right lumbar, left lumbar, and then to the side of the hypogastric, we're going to find the region called the inguinal, also called iliac. So we have the right inguinal or iliac, and we have the left inguinal or iliac. Okay? Any questions, folks? All right. Now, if we were in the lab today, instead of being online, if we were face-to-face, we would be working doing dissection of an animal. And the animal that we use as a model for human body, because we don't have human cadavers, so the next best thing that we have are pigs. So we would be using this little guy right here, which is a fetal pig. Okay, and fetal pigs are used throughout the entire world as a model for human body, for human dissection. If you don't have a cadaver, oftentimes you work with fetal pigs. Now, why pigs in general? Guys, there are several reasons why pigs are great models for the human body. In fact, there are research going on right now that has been going on for probably 10, 15 years, in which scientists are trying to humanize a pig. What do you think humanizing a pig means? What comes to your mind when you think of a humanized pig? Why do you think scientists are trying to do that? Let's have a little discussion here. No right or wrong, guys. I just want to hear from you so I can stop talking. So what do you think is a humanized pig? Come on, help me out here. This is why we go to school. Critical thinking, discussion,
Maybe giving
exchange. Go
a
ahead,
pig,
Vanessa.
maybe giving a pig human rights.
Human rights. Okay. That's a good guess. Anybody else? So what do you think science is doing? If you read a headline, okay, on a paper or a magazine, actually nobody reads papers and magazines anymore, right? Okay, Facebook, on Instagram, that's better. If you see there says scientists are trying to humanize a pig, what would you think? Anybody else? I don't know and I don't care. It's so hard to get you guys to talk, to exchange ideas. Guys, you're not being taken points off. You can breathe in, relax. I just want to hear from you, your opinion. Doesn't need to be right or wrong. We're all here to learn, right?
Organ transplant.
Organ transplant. Okay, what do you mean by that, Chantal? So again, so when they are trying to humanize pigs, and then you mention organ transplant, what do you think scientists are trying to do? And it does have to do with this organ transplants. So what they are trying to do, guys, is this. What science is trying to do is that they are trying to change the physiology of pigs by genetically engineering pigs so that the organs of pigs are more similar to the organs of humans. Now, not on the shape of the organs per se, because pigs, and this is one of the reasons why we use pigs as a model for humans, because pigs in general, their size of a pig's heart, of an adult pig heart, is pretty similar to the size of our heart. So our heart, the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, the skin, we share a lot of similarities with pig. Okay, so both in the anatomy and also in the physiology, both in the structure and also in the function. Now, the problem is, of course, if you try to take a heart from a pig, any pig, and then you put that heart into a human, our body is going to attack and destroy that heart so fast, it's not going to last a week. Because we have an immune system that is programmed, that is designed to destroy anything that is foreigner to our body. That's what the immune system should do. Get rid of anything that is foreigner. So we can't do that. We can't just take an organ from a pig and stick it into a human. Now, what scientists then are trying to do, again, through genetic engineering, is to change the cells and the markers on the surface of the cells of a pig so that they are more similar to the cells that we find in a human being. So that now, when you have someone that needs a heart transplant or a kidney transplant or a liver transplant, we can take the organ from that animal and then put that organ into a human. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, oh, this is science fiction. It will never happen. Actually, it has already happened. We had the 3 patients already, which were all terminal patients, patients that had nothing else that medicine could do for them. And those patients, they basically said, you know what? I want to be part of that experiment. And what they did is that they took the heart of a genetically engineered pig and they transferred that into the patient. The last patient that received a transplanted heart from a pig survived for about 6 months. Now you might be thinking to yourself, oh, that's not long at all. That is huge, actually, guys. It's just to show that it is absolutely possible and doable to one day, and I would say within the next 10 years, we will have the option of transplanting, organs from a pig into a human. And that's what humanizing a pig means. Now, of course, those pigs, they're going to be grown in sterile environments. If you imagine a hospital, imagine a hospital operating room where everything is sterilized and clean. This is where those pigs would be raised. Okay, so that to make sure that they have no diseases, no, viral infection or bacterial infection when we transfer those organs into a human being. Now, I have a question for you, though. Would you receive a heart from a pig? Would you receive any organ from a pig, guys? Anybody here would not. You would refuse to receive an organ from a pig. Okay, so everybody wouldn't have any problem with that. Right, now, there's no right or wrong. Some people don't even eat pigs, right? Or any animals for that matter. So I would understand that people having an ethical issue, a problem with raising those animals to use their organs. But one of the things, though, is that we've been raising animals like pigs for hundreds of years so that we can eat them, we can consume them. So it's not a far-fetched idea that then we would be raising them not to eat them, not to consume them, but actually to use their organs. Okay. All right, so let me give you a further introduction of this little guy right here. So how would we do a dissection of a fiddle pig? Which is one of the videos you guys are going to be watching today on Edpuzzle, part of the in-lab activity. What you're going to do is that you're going to take this little pig in the dorsal region, right here. You're going to put it into a dissecting tray. Then you would take like strings and you're going to attach the feet and the hands of the pig to the tray. And you're going to spread them and secure them on the tray. Then you're going to do several different cuttings. You're going to do an opening right above the belly button, the umbilical cord right there. And then two other openings to the hind limbs. And then one long opening all the way from the first opening to the chin. A couple openings to the front legs. And then a couple of the other open incisions right through that first incision. And now what we're going to do? We can completely open up that fiddle pig. And we are able to look at all the internal organs and the cavities, the thoracic cavity, and also the abdominal pelvic cavity. So let's zoom in here into some of these cavities and the organs and take a closer look at them. Guys, right here, I took a picture. I lifted the liver, and then I took a picture of a gallbladder right there, which is this little pouch right underneath the liver. What is the function of the gallbladder? The gallbladder is involved with the storage of bile. Bile that is produced by the liver is going to go inside the gallbladder and be stored and concentrated there. When we eat a fatty meal, now we're going to have bile being injected into the duodenum of the fiddle pig or our body, and that the bile is going to break down fat. Okay. Now here we have another view of the abdominal pelvic cavity. So we can see the big old liver in the right upper quadrant. And then on the left upper quadrant, we can see the stomach right there. And right to the side of the stomach, we can also see the spleen right there. What is the function of the spleen, guys? One of the functions of the spleen is to cleanse our blood. If we have any viral or bacterial infection in our blood, as the blood passes through the spleen contains white blood cells called macrophages that are going to destroy those microbes. Okay? And the spleen also recycle old, worn out red blood cells. Right over here, you can't see it very well, but right in this region that I'm circling right here, guys, this is where the pancreas of the fiddle pig is. Now, I don't know, again, if you can notice, but there is actually a membrane on top of the pancreas. We can't see the surface of the pancreas. This is because the pancreas is found behind the parieto-peritoneal membrane. It has what we call a retroperitoneal position. So the pancreas and also the kidneys, they are behind this membrane. So we have to cut through the membrane to expose the pancreas, to expose the kidneys. Here we have a better view of the intestines. In the middle right here, we can see the large intestine of the fiddle pig. And then to the side, all around, we can see the small intestines. And then down below here, we can see the urinary bladder of the fiddle pig, and to the side we can see the ureters. What are the ureters? The ureters are going to take blood from the kidneys, it's going to take urine from the kidneys and send the urine inside the urinary bladder. Okay, and then from the urinary bladder, the urine is going to pass through the urethra and out of the body. Now let's take a closer look at the small intestine here, folks, because I want to show you something right here. And what I want to show you is that we can see that the small intestine is held in place by a membrane, this shiny surface right here. This is what we call the mesentery. Remember, the mesentery is the membrane, is part of the peritoneal membrane that is going to hold the small intestine in place. And then we have the mesocolon, which is going to hold the large intestine in place. Moving on, let's take a closer look at the thoracic cavity. And of course, within the thoracic cavity, we have our heart and the lungs. We can see the heart in the middle and the lungs to the side. And what I really want you guys to notice right here, folks, everybody look up here, please. Can you see how on the surface of the heart, there is a membrane? We can see this membrane kind of folded right here. This is the pericardial membrane, okay, which is the membrane that surrounds the heart and which is going to form the pericardial cavity. Now, there's also the pleural membrane on top of the lungs, covering the lungs, but the pleural membrane is a lot thinner than the pericardial membrane. The pericardial membrane is very thick, very tough, okay? All right, guys, what are we doing today for the in-lab activity? Two things, both of them on Edpuzzle. So you're going to watch one of the videos, going to walk you through the dissection of a fetal pig. The second video is going to walk you through a human model of the different cavities that we have in our body, okay? The thoracic, abdominal, pelvic, and cranial cavity. After you're done with those two videos, make sure you watch until the end. Then you're going to get back to Lamaku and you're going to take the in-lab quiz. After you're done with the quiz, you're good to go. Any questions, guys? All right, let's get started.